All right, welcome back to the OU Sports Podcast. I'm Colton Sulley, joined by Jason Batacao and Louis Raser here on Zoom. Um, Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I think this will drop. This will drop the day before Thanksgiving. So today, the day we're recording it. Got lots to get into. It's a short week. Obviously, had a long weekend with BYU. Got TCU coming up here on a Friday. But how you guys doing?
Doing
Good.
well, Colton. I'm glad to see you, man. There were times where I didn't know if you'd make it back to Norman. You want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, man. Supposed to get back to OKC around 11 p.m. Sunday night. Didn't end up getting back until Monday at 1 p.m. So that was fun. Sat on a tarmac for like 3 hours in Salt Lake City before they finally just deplaned us and put us up in a hotel and rebooked us for the next day. But between snow, engine failure, and F1 being in Las Vegas, it just kind of screwed us. But glad to be back. Glad to be talking some OU football. So let's get into it. I mean, I was there in Provo. It was just a beautiful setting, probably the best setting in college football I've been to. Saw an incredible game. Obviously, closer than a lot of OU fans, hoped it would be, but still a crazy game. Dylan Gabriel obviously got hurt. Jackson Arnold came in. Looked pretty good for, his first meaningful action in college football. Looked a little nervous, missed a couple throws, but made that spectacular throw there at the end and to get the win. But guys, what did you think just from watching back in Norman about Dylan's injury, Jackson coming in, and then you guys were at Brent Venables' press conference on Monday. What did he say about Dylan's availability and Jackson if he's going to start?
Yeah, so we touched on Dylan and Jaleel. Obviously, Jaleel took the hit on that final play that kind of sealed the game, and he basically said if they continue to progress throughout the week, they'll be good to go on Friday. Obviously, probably the worst week for that to happen to OU since they have such a quick turnaround Friday at 11 a.m. But yeah, we didn't really get too much clarity on what the Dylan injury actually is, other than an upper body injury, which is what Brent said after the game. So it kind of looked like his head smacked down on the turf. Don't want to speculate, obviously, but anytime it has anything to do with the head, that's obviously a scary thing. But yeah, Jackson, I mean, obviously his stat line wasn't great, but just coming in and commanding the offense and what some of the guys were saying about him, checking out of certain reads and just commanding the offense like a redshirt senior would do, not like a freshman would do. I think the maturity is just it's there with Jackson. I know Emmett Jones had a tweet today that was like he was in the locker room with Patrick Mahomes when he would come in, and he said the look on Jackson's face was exactly the look that Patrick Mahomes gave him many times at Texas Tech. So, I thought it was a sign of good things to come, no doubt.
Yeah, he had that one big throw on third down to Jalil Farouk. Obviously, Jalil got whammed on that throw or that catch, but I mean, obviously he had those freshman struggles. I think he missed was it Drake or was it Nick Anderson on that deep out? I don't remember who it was, but just kind of like Colton said, there was a few jitters here and there. He was kind of it looked like he was a not uncomfortable, but like a freshman in a that he was just thrown into the fire. But I thought he handled it well. He did what he had to do and closed out the game, which OU has struggled with in numerous points this season. And kind of like Dylan Gabriel did, he came through when OU's offense needed him and made a big time. Some people even say a big time NFL throw. So I think that's really good news for OU. Obviously, BB, as kind of Lewis said, thinks Dylan will be ready this week. But somebody asked him, I forget who it was, but one of our fellow reporting peers mentioned, what happens if Jackson does start against TCU? And Brent kind of had the same confidence that he does in Dylan. He's like, we run the same offense as we do with Dylan and Jackson. They take a lot of first team reps. So I think that there's a lot of confidence in Jackson and if he's able to play, if Dylan's not able to play, excuse me.
Yeah, for sure, guys. That's definitely the storyline of the BYU game and of the week is Dylan Gabriel going to play? We'll see on that. But the other story of the week, I know everybody's dropping stories today about Senior Day coming up. Drake Stoops is going to play his final regular season game in an OU uniform. Jason, we'll let you take this one. I know you've done a lot of reporting, talked to a lot of folks around Drake. Um, kind of where did his competitive edge come from? I mean, obviously grew up with the Stoops name, so that's in his blood, but like talk us through, his decision to come to his dad's, former school or the school where his dad coached, but also, trying to overcome the Stoops name and, make himself his own, like, come into his own.
Yeah, I talked to, gosh, it was upwards of I think 10 people. I talked to Brent Venables' kids. I talked to Isaac Stoops. I talked to Bob. Um, really an assortment to gather that journey of Drake's life, and coming to OU was hard for Drake. A lot of people mentioned that like he was close to Iowa, like almost wasn't a Sooner. Like this 6-year journey almost didn't happen. And kind of as you mentioned, that chip on his shoulder, the belief in himself and that competitive mindset of like, look, I'm gonna be Drake, not defined by the STOOPS on the back of my jersey. I think that really is the story of Drake. One of the people I talked to compared Drake to John F. Kennedy Jr. And kind of had some similarities there, and it's kind of, I mean, sort of similar stories. They grow up under their famous fathers and the microscopes on them, but they sort of create a name for themselves. Weird parallel there, but it's interesting when you put it in the right perspective. So yeah, interesting story that'll be dropping soon at oudaily.com. Hope you guys go ahead and read it when it's out.
For sure. Really good stuff from Jason. Make sure and come back to oudaily.com for that. Sorry for the technical difficulties, had to change rooms, but as I was just saying, it's going to be interesting to watch Drake play his final game. Not only in Norman, but regular season game in an OU jersey. Just wonder how he performs in that moment. Wonder what the scene is like post game. I'm sure Bob will be down there on the field with the whole fam, and it'll probably be bittersweet for every OU fan. But another player that we wrote about this week. Huh?
I was just gonna say bold take. I think the decibel system might, or the decibel meter might break in Gaylord Family Memorial Stadium when they're doing Stoops on Saturday, because that is like the Oklahoma, or on Friday, that is like the Oklahoma program embodied into one dude. I think that's kind of, Jason, that's kind of wraps around your story. So really encourage people to go read that if they haven't already.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And then I was just gonna say another guy we wrote about this week, Lewis. You could maybe take this one. Probably, I know you talked to him this week, but really just a guy, not a senior, obviously, but a guy that's really came into his own this year. I mean, didn't really play a whole lot last year. Was a really talented guy, but has really filled a role at linebacker. Why don't you talk a little bit about Kobe?
Yeah, well, I posted a video on Twitter or X of Kobe kind of talking about his journey from last year to this year, receiving playing time. And it was interesting because he just sounds like a senior. Like he's so well spoken, mature guy, and just what he was saying about, and even Brent Venables talked about it. He had a rough go of things at first, tore his groin in the first off season, first fall camp that he had with OU. It's tough to get playing time as a freshman when you can't show the coaches what you're made of in fall camp. But then this year, he's these past 3 games really, and it started with the Danny Stutzman injury. He's really coming to his own, and not only is he getting playing time, but he's had a big effect on this defense. I mean, he's really stepped in when Jared Kanik is kind of, his production has kind of fallen off. Stutzman's injury, and he's getting food poisoning. Kobe McKenzie has stepped in and been one of those guys, along with Kip Lewis, obviously. So yeah, just a really mature, well-spoken guy. And I thought it was interesting. There's a story up on oudaily.com, but I thought it was interesting just to hear about his journey and about the resilience and the belief that he maintained in himself throughout everything that he had to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. He's played really well. We all knew the talent was there. But another interesting news peg this week was Brent Venables named 7 permanent captains. I guess that's just captains the rest of the year, going into the postseason. But it was the usual suspects. I thought it was, not shocking at all. I think Dylan Gabriel, Drake Stoops, Danny Stutzman, McCade Matower, Woody Washington, Ethan Downs. I think I'm missing one, but the usual. Yeah, Billy Bowman. Yeah, the usual suspects there. Um, any guys that you thought maybe could have made that list as well? I was a little shocked that maybe Isaiah Coe or a guy like that didn't make it. But are there any players that you guys were shocked didn't make the list?
I think Isaiah Coe is the main one. Maybe I could have seen like a Walter Rouse potentially, but then again, we're not in the locker room. We don't see the main guys. I will say I was a little surprised at Billy Bowman just because he's not a talkative guy. And even the players, when they were asked about him, they were like, yeah, he's not a loud guy. He's not a guy to step up and be yelling, Texas fears Oklahoma in the locker room. But when he does talk, all eyes go to him because he doesn't say much. And like, when he does have to say something, it's rich and it's valuable and people pay attention to him. So I think that probably kind of got his nod for that.
I was I wasn't really surprised by anybody, if I'm being honest. I mean, you guys mentioned Walter. Um, I don't know. I really feel like the 8 that they chose were the right 8. I mean, maybe you throw in like I don't know, an Austin Stogner on there or an Andrew Rame, but like I feel like the 8 guys that they had were, representative of the Brent Venables culture and foundation. At least that's my opinion. So there wasn't really any surprises for me. I was like,
It
hmm,
was
that
seven.
makes sense.
Seven.
Seven. Okay, my bad. The 7 players that were on there. Yeah, I thought that they were. It was yeah, thought they were the right 7.
For sure, guys. Let's talk a little bit of special teams. That's been kind of a theme here on the pod the last couple weeks. So I thought we would just do a special teams check-in, and it's not looking much better. A lot of complaints around, OU fans and Saturday after Zach Schmidt missed a field goal and another one. Not been very reliable all season long. I know Lewis has written about that throughout the season and kind of kept track on that. So I want to hear from you just a little bit about Zach and his struggles and what Brent has said about those and just sticking with him. Obviously, Gavin Marshall, highly recruited out of high school, has been injured most of the season. Doesn't really look like they have another guy that could just jump right in and fill Zach Schmidt's shoes, but you've got to think whether it's in the portal coming up. I mean, I don't know what the market's like for kickers in the portal, but maybe they like what they have with Gavin Marshall, but you've got to think at some point. Um, I mean, whenever I see Zach Schmidt go out and try a field goal, I'm not very confident that it's going to go in. So you've got to think at some point something's going to have to be looked at there, guys. But so Lewis, I want to hear your thoughts on that. But then also, what do we think of the fake punt? I mean, that was pretty incredible. It didn't stand obviously because the penalty, but how about Ethan Downs? I might, with Austin Stogner struggling, might throw him in at tight end.
Yeah, I didn't have Luke Alzinga throws to Ethan Downs for a 30-yard completion on my bingo card this year. But give credit where credit's due. I mean, that was a hell of a pass by Luke Alzinga, and he's been kicking the crap out of the ball recently. And this is a team that was not good at punting at all the first couple of weeks. I know after the Texas game, we were talking about it after they shanked a couple there. But he's filled in really nicely. On the kicking side, it's been bad, really bad. I was crunching some numbers this weekend. Schmidt is 1 for 4 from over 40 yards. He's 5 for 10 over 30 yards. Even though Saturday his miss was a 28-yarder. He's 12 for 18. He was 12 for 18 last year. That's 66.7%. That's the worst percentage since 2008. So bad. He's been bad. Brent Venables this week, he said they're trying out everybody in practice. Schmidt is just the most impressive one in practice. So I think that says more about the backups and the depth of that unit or lack of than it does about Schmidt.
Yeah,
I
and
thought, sorry,
oh,
just real quick on the fake punt. Just thought it was a hell of a call by Brent Venables. It seemed to me like one of those Bob Stoops calls back in the day where he would, dial up something in that area in that time of the game, but just a hell of a call by Brent there. I know it didn't work out, but still.
yeah, and kind of to piggyback off of the Gavin Marshall thing, I'm pretty sure Brent mentioned that Gavin Marshall's been dealing with some sort of injury. I don't know what it is, or maybe he mentioned it and I missed it. But I mean, that's a big development because I mean, if Gavin Marshall's been hurt, it's not like he hasn't been getting an opportunity. He's just been hurt, so maybe you know next year Gavin Marshall gets a chance or something. I don't know. Zach Smith just I don't think he's it. So yeah.
Yeah, pretty bad, like Lewis said, pretty bad. Guys, let's check in on some Oklahoma hoops. I mean, undefeated, neither team has lost. I know we've talked primarily about football most of the season, but with football, wrapping up here, we're gonna dive more into other OU sports during the spring semester, guys. But how about OU women's basketball? I mean, start the year off, what is they 5-0? They go down to Ole Miss, beat a number 12 Ole Miss team, and then go on the road again this past weekend to Charlottesville and beat Virginia. Lewis, you covered this team last year. What have you seen? I mean, and I think I know what it is. I think it's, whether it's through the portal with a player like Peyton Verhulst or getting Sahara Williams out of the high school ranks. But what have you seen that's different from this team early on compared to last season, especially after losing a Maddie Williams and all those big time players?
They look connected. They look really, really well gelled together. And I think the concern coming into this year, the concern that I had was they were a small lineup last year. They got even smaller this year. But that hasn't really affected them. Like they went down to Ole Miss, got a double-digit victory over a really, really good Ole Miss team that we saw shock some people in the NCAA tournament last year. And then the win over Virginia, just dominance there. I think all the new additions, Sahara Williams is just a beast. Peyton Verhulst, she's been outstanding. She had that one 32-point game. Even Lexi Keys contributing. Aubrey Jones, I don't know if I've seen her miss a three-pointer yet this season. So it's all just coming together, all gelling together. I think Skylar Van getting starting minutes for really the first time in her career has been huge. But just a lot of different pieces contributing. Everything seems to be firing. Everything seems to be working. Now they do have a couple big tests coming up. I'm excited to see them play Princeton and number 19 Tennessee. That'll be the big one. And then they still have North Carolina to play on this non-conference schedule. That's pretty grueling, but really excited to see them once it gets into Big 12 play because it's a pretty competitive conference. I mean, they got destroyed by Texas twice last year. Oklahoma State's going to be solid. Kansas State's good this year. So it'll be fun to see what happens.
Yeah, and obviously Tennessee's the big one. I'm really looking forward to the Princeton game tomorrow on Thanksgiving. Princeton was an NCAA tournament team. I think that's just another test on this grueling, like you said, non-con schedule. What about them so far? I know last year and the year before, kind of the knock on them was like they don't have a big, or like they're not going to rebound against a Notre Dame, or they're not going to score on a UCLA or whatever, or a Texas or whatever it was. Um, do you see any, early on in this schedule, do you see any like indications that this team can compete in the Big 12?
Yeah, absolutely. They can be one of the top teams in the Big 12. I think that's still a question mark. I mean, it has only been 5 games after all. Like you got to figure that the size and the height is going to catch up to them one of these games. But they've got some physical rebounders. They tend to really crash the boards when the ball does go up. So I'm excited to see how that works out. I think that's kind of the main knock on this team. Obviously, turnovers, that was a huge question mark last year. Defense overall, but that seems to be a lot better this year. And Jenny Baranchik can just coach an offense like nobody else. I mean, they're always top of the line when it comes to assists, facilitating. And I think that's this team. And they seem so well gelled together. The chemistry really, really seems there for such a kind of new team.
I watched that Ole Miss game, and it really seemed like Jenny just willed that team to victory. Like, she was not going to go down there and lose. So really impressed with them. Jason, you and I are pretty, familiar with the other basketball team here on campus. I covered Porter Moser's first season here. You covered his second one last year.
Yep.
Obviously, big expectations heading into this season. His third one, hasn't made the NCAA tournament during his time here. At the time, obviously big splashy hire after taking Loyola Chicago to the Final Four and Elite Eight. Hasn't even made the tournament here yet. However, undefeated to start the season. Even especially to me, they appear, longer, faster, bigger. I mean, me and you went to the scrimmage recently, Jason, and guys like Jalen Moore and Javion McCullum and John Hughley, they're just more athletic and bigger, in my opinion. What have you seen early on here in the regular season? I know they haven't played anybody, but like, what have you seen just from the athleticism point of view, and just like, how do you think that's going to translate when they play tougher competition?
Man, like you said, I just think they're better in almost every area that they lacked last season. I mean, they have multiple guys that can go out and score. They have multiple guys that can defend multiple positions. I think Otega Owe has really taken a next step. Jalen Moore is so fun to watch. I mean, I don't know what his stat line was the other night, but the guy could just ball. I mean, he's a high flyer. He's long. He's athletic. He can guard anybody from 1 to 5, depending on a lineup. Javian McCollum is just a gamer. The guy can ball. Milos Uzon is a great playmaker. I think this team's much more suited to compete in the Big 12 now than they were in any of Porter Moser's first 2 seasons. And I think that goes into and as we hear Porter say, these first 4 games, these are like his guys in a way. This is his first entire recruiting class. Why he didn't do that his first 2 seasons, I don't know. But maybe that was a wake up call or a foundational need to have those first 2 seasons to get to the point that where he's at. But obviously, they faced Central Michigan, Texas State, and 2 other teams I can't name off the top of my head. But
Mississippi Valley State or something.
yeah, and then like University Texas.
State, Texas.
Rio Grande.
Yeah, something like that. They faced 4 teams that are probably not going to make the tournament. I'm excited to see the Rady Children's Invitational because I think their first is Iowa, and then if they move on, they face either Seton Hall or USC. And
USC, yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, those are, they're not known for basketball, but I mean, if they face USC, I don't.
USC's really good.
USC's really
Isaiah
good.
Collier. It's gonna
Yep.
be fun to watch.
Right.
But I think
I've got
go ahead, Lewis.
kind of just a question I wanted to pose to both of you because you guys have covered this team and you guys know that they can start out well or they can look really well in a game and kind of fade. They've got Iowa on Thanksgiving. They have Providence next Tuesday. They've got North Carolina December 20th. Are we going to know in this non-conference schedule if this is a legit team? Like, when are we going to find out if this is really a good Porter Moser team, a tournament Porter Moser team, or when are we going to find out if they fall off?
I don't think you find out until January at least. Like, OU's men's non-conference is not as tough as the women's at all. I mean, obviously they play North Carolina. They still have Arkansas, right? They're still playing that Tulsa game against Arkansas. So those 2 games, I think those 2 games will be, interesting to see where they're at. But I just think with this team right now, they don't really play anybody non-con other than those 2 schools. You can see, I think you can, even though they've not played anybody, you can see that maybe they didn't go get a splashy player in the portal like Tanner Groves 2 years ago that scored 30 points against Kansas in the tournament. But I think their depth of portal guys is the best that Porter's had here. I think the knock on him has been like He hasn't
Right.
he hasn't knocked the portal out of the park. That's why they can't make the tournament. And I think largely that's true the first 2 seasons, but I think that the depth of the guys he was able to go get, whether it was a John Hughley or Rivaldo Soares or any of these guys that he went out and got, I think the depth of those is better and they look better. But also, Lewis, like the Big 12 got tougher. You got Houston. You got like I don't know if it'll be enough to get them to the tournament, but we shall see. We shall see pretty soon. We'll keep updating here on the pod about OU hoops. Jason, you have anything real quick? We're running out of time here. No? Awesome.
Yeah, we're good.
Cool. Um, let's talk some football again. OU TCU, obviously Black Friday, 11 a.m. Final regular season game. Guys, after that game, it's going to be complete chaos around the country. We're going to have coaching carousel. We're going to have transfer portal. We're going to have signing day then in the next week or two. Who knows what's going to happen with the Big 12 championship scenarios. We'll try not even to cipher through that here on this pod. Maybe we'll do a emergency pod if OU happens to get in. But for now, it's the Horned Frogs and the Sooners on Friday. Lewis, you're gonna go first this time, buddy. What's your score prediction?
Well, I'm going to give a score prediction, and these guys are going to give close to the exact same one. But anyways, I would, part of me thinks OU just comes out and just beats the crap out of them. But honestly, I think TCU, their offense has been rolling. They've had a couple, like 500-yard offensive performances recently. They haven't looked as bad as they did earlier in the year. I think Oklahoma wins this. I'm going to go ahead and say 38-27. I think TCU keeps it decently close. I think Dylan Gabriel's really firing, though, if he plays. So we'll see what happens, but I see an Oklahoma win regardless.
Yeah. Kind of making this prediction off the rip. Obviously, I think OU comes out and wins this game. They get back to, I wouldn't say it's an OU standard, but a lot of people talked about the pride and getting back to a 10-win season. I think this is going to be kind of like an Iowa State game or who'd they face? A West Virginia. They just come out and they scorch earth. I think OU wins like 47-20, maybe even 47-13. I think Dylan Gabriel will probably play. I think him and Drake Stoops have a similar game as they did West Virginia. And they're the guiding force to beating the Horned Frogs.
Yeah, guys, obviously TCU hasn't had the season that, they hoped after making the national championship, but they had a couple close games. I think they almost upset Texas, right? I mean, they kept it close with Texas. I still think they could make a little bit of noise, but right the day after Thanksgiving in Norman, obviously senior night for Drake Stoops and possibly we haven't really talked about it much on the pod, but more than likely Dylan Gabriel's last regular season in an OU uniform as well. Regular season game, sorry. But I'm gonna agree with both of you. With both of y'all, I think OU wins by more than 2 touchdowns. I'm gonna go 30-13. I think it's just an easy win for OU here.
Yeah, and kind of to touch on the senior night, we haven't talked about it too much, but like, at what point do you start looking at guys that aren't seniors but are, high draft picks? At what point do you start looking Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, guys like that?
I was gonna say not even that, but I mean that's a good point as well. But even transfer portal candidates. I mean,
Right.
we're probably gonna get into that next week, but you're gonna start seeing guys filter through the portal as early as whenever games end this weekend.
Right.
But I think that's also a good point, Lewis. You have several guys on this team. Billy Bowman really comes to mind that could, make that jump to the NFL early. So, but Brent Venables, just real quick, I mean, talked at length during his press conference about just how different this team is compared to last season. And you can just look at the records. I mean, 9-2 versus 7-6. And if they beat TCU, that's a 10-win season. I think a lot of OU fans entering this season would have been happy with a 10-win season. Obviously, after beating Texas, those expectations jumped through the roof and everybody was expecting playoff guys. But if OU can go get a win against TCU here and possibly make it to the Big 12 championship, possibly make it to a better than decent bowl game, I think that this season will be looked back as a success. And I think guys like Dylan Gabriel and Drake Stoops will be remembered as a huge part of that. So, but anything else to add before we log off?
Excited to close the season out. Excited for some hoops on Thanksgiving, definitely.
For sure. Tune into that. I'm Colton Sulley, Jason Batacao, Louis Raser. Keep it with OUDaily.com. We'll have everything from hoops tomorrow, football on Friday, and everything that follows, including possibly conference championship, possible transfer portal, draft decisions, signing day, everything in between. We'll be back next week. Thanks, guys, for listening. Keep it with OUDaily.com.